1:30, I get assigned to start. Welcome at the Foreign Correspondents Club. Today we have a special guest, Professor Hayashi from Tokyo University. She has been a member of the third party that researched the Asahi Shimbun's retraction of article about the comfort women problem. At that time, I think the Asahi Shimbun story in Japanese media played an important part. I personally was a bit surprised that all Japanese media, even on the internet websites, had the button Asahi Shimbun. In this way, it started some sort of debate about Japanese media, the problems and challenges. This is a topic we will talk about. Just a few sentences. Professor Hayashi has an impressive academic career, and this talk will be in English, as we don't have any interpreter. We could have it in German as well, because she's fluent in German, but I think then we will be alone. She started in Germany, in the United States, and she is one of the academics that has experience in the sector she writes about and works about. She worked as a journalist when she started her career in the Reuters bureau in Tokyo, 1988 till 1991, and then changed to the academic career. Now she's a full teaching professor at Tokyo University, and I think one of the most experienced specialist in Japanese media, comparing with international media. So give her a warm welcome, please. And normally I forget to mention, switch off your mobile phones, please, because it might disturb. And Professor Hayashi will start with a short briefing, and after this we have the Q&A session with the working press first, and then other members later.
Thank you, Mr. Gambis. Thank you very much for coming to this lecture and giving me this opportunity to talk. 25 years ago, I was sitting in the opposite side as a very young journalist, and now I have this chance to talk to you from here, which is a great honor for me. Thank you. So I will talk today about Japanese media and their problems and challenges, which is a very broad theme. So I will focus on three challenges today. The first is the relation with the internet, which is a big issue for any journalism in the world. And secondly, I will talk about this sort of inward-looking, domestic-oriented Japanese journalism and how foreign news is covered in the Japanese journalism. And in conjunction with this, I will talk about this latest comfort women issue, which happened to Asahi Shimbun. And I had this survey on with the foreign articles and concluded that Mr. Abe is an agenda setter of the comfort women issue. So let me start with the conventional media and internet. Well, first of all, the level of public trust. And the level of public trust in the media has been very high in Japan, as maybe you all are aware of. In this country, newspaper journalists and TV broadcasters are more trusted than scholars or scientists. But nevertheless, just like their counterparts in any other developed countries, Japanese print media are not doing well. The total newspaper revenue has declined over the past 15 years, albeit not as steeply as in the United States and Europe. Advertising revenue, which accounts for roughly 1/3 of the total, has fallen off, particularly since the recent global recession. In comparison, the decline in circulation revenue, which accounts for almost 60% of the total, has been negligible. In 2013, circulation revenue was down about 10% from the 1997 peak. So this revenue structure is in contrast with the case in the United States, for example, where circulation revenue accounts for a modest 27% of total revenue, according to the latest survey. So the degree of the crisis is not as serious as the United States newspaper industry, but nevertheless, Japanese newspapers are in crisis, primarily because of the aging readership and diversification of media outlets that limit their advertising revenues. I must add at this point the peculiarities of the structure of the Japanese newspaper market, namely its strong circulation revenues thanks to the extensive home delivery network, which penetrates every corner of the nation. So you see these small shops in the corner of the street, that these are the delivery stations. They are independent delivery stations. And this network of home delivery is sustained, it's sustained by nearly 20,000 distributors. This system has created a nationwide home delivery network that accounts for a full 95% of Japanese newspapers sold. And personal and community relationships have been the key factors that determine subscriber loyalty. Many Japanese readers remain loyal to one newspaper or another simply because their family has always subscribed to that newspaper or because they happen to know the neighborhood distributor. In other words, Japanese newspapers largely incorporate features of a community paper. Some delivery stations, particularly in the populated rural areas, even offer services like renting wheelchairs or helping change light bulbs for the aged, or offering home visits to check on people living alone, reinforcing the newspaper's role as a community medium. This is the case even with papers that sell millions of copies nationwide. However, such communal trust among Japanese is being challenged. At the moment, the aging readership is the biggest concern for the industry. If we see this graph, men below the age of 40 spend more time on the internet than on newspapers. It is expected that this trend will not change greatly as they get older. So in 50 years, the present-day teenagers are likely to stay with the internet and will not support the traditional print media community in Japan. And this chart shows clearly the discrepancies in trust in newspapers and in the internet as news media among different generations. More and more younger people regard the internet as an indispensable news source, whereas for older people, it's the other way around. Now, talking about the television programs, particularly those which are broadcast by NHK and the 5 Tokyo-based key networks, have been widely watched by people too. The average TV viewing hours of the Japanese people amounts to as much as 3 hours and 46 minutes. This compares with 3 hours in 1985. The increase, about 46 minutes, however, accounts for the growth in the viewing time of commercial television and not NHK. So NHK has been struggling to define itself as a national channel. A 2010 NHK survey found that roughly 60% of Japanese teenagers today have virtually no weekly contact with NHK. But the amount of time to watch NHK rose sharply with age. NHK has become a media service that is more oriented toward senior citizens. Therefore, there are grave concerns within the network that if this trend continues unchecked, eventually no one will be watching it at all. Recently, news values in Japan are said to have become domestic and inward-looking in the arena of Japanese media. In my opinion, this trend takes place exactly at the juncture of such declining reader and viewership on the one hand, and the efforts to redefine Japan and reinforce its nationalism in the face of slow economic growth in the past decades on the other. In post-war Japan, it surely has been the major newspapers and TV stations that gave the Japanese people a broad sense of community of what it is to be a Japanese in various ways. To some, it was a liberal creed of pacifism that dominated in the popular sentiment during the 60s and 70s. Others enjoyed the perception of Japan as number one during the bubble economy of the 80s. And these images were created and augmented mostly by the Japanese corporate media, which grew and expanded in every facet of our lives. However, in the face of proliferation of the internet as well as globalization, conventional media, such as newspapers and broadcasting, which are defined according to the national boundaries, are forced to redefine their role as information media. Many young people turn their back to these conventional media and prefer the internet that supports their much diversified and individual lives and identities. But more recently, the government or the Abe administration has actively tried to take over the role of defining such collective national narratives. Indeed, the most distinctive part of the second Abe administration is its power and willingness to be an agenda setter of the nation. Starting with the term Abenomics, the administration put forth a variety of agendas and concepts such as proactive pacifism or creating a society in which all women shine. I like this very much. And collective self-defense, state secrets law in the past years. And Japanese media, most of the Japanese media, rather uncritically followed these steps to redefine their role as media for the national community. In addition, Mr. Abe raised questions on long disputed issues that were raised by the liberals, such as the constitution, nuclear energy, or comfort women. The Abe administration does this strategically to integrate younger generations and even women, particularly with the help of new digital information tools such as Twitter and Facebook. It may be the first administration in Japan to use digital outlets exhaustively for its politics. Mr. Abe has been quite active in articulating his personal views in his Facebook, and more often than not, they became headlines. Now I turn to look at foreign news. While Japanese media have been quite enthusiastic about reporting such government policies and interest in details, they are not doing well in reporting foreign affairs. Our international research on national flagship TV news programs show that the number of foreign news items, as well as the proportion of the broadcasting time on foreign news, is comparatively low. If you see this chart, NHK, which is written as PBS in Japan, is doing remarkably badly as a public service broadcasting channel in reporting foreign and international news. So in Western Europe conception, PBS is the medium that would report foreign news because it's costly and it's too serious and so on. So you don't have to, but as PBS, you don't have to really be careful about rating and so on. But for example, in Japan, it's the other way around. The commercial broadcasting report more foreign news than PBS. And this is also true if you see the South Korea. They have they report quite much of the foreign news, and also as an Asian PBS, they are reluctant to report foreign news if you compare with the private commercial channels. So the notion of PBS is quite different in Asian regions. That's what we found out. This is also, the results are also same if you see the amount of the international and foreign news on TV here in Japan too, and also Korea. And you see Norway, UK, they have, the PBS are stronger in reporting foreign and international news. So these results presumably come from differences in the understanding of the normative role of mass media. In Japan, many people, including intellectuals, see one important normative role of mass media as serving the national interest and the good for society rather than just providing information freely. And this tendency impacts the digital news as well. Sorry, this is very hard to see, but I will explain to you this. we also surveyed popular website headlines news in non-consecutive 3 weeks and found out that Japanese website news lacks the variety in the countries they cover. So websites in other nations had more news with a variety of origins. So here, the websites in Japan, they mostly report on China, South Korea, and that time South Africa because of the World Cup. And that's almost about all what they carried in the headlines. Whereas in the other nations, they have more varieties of origins in the news. And we also found out that among 11 nations we surveyed, the Japanese public showed relatively low interest in international affairs. This may be somewhat correlated to the reluctant attitude of covering foreign news on the part of the Japanese media. So we see Japan and Colombia are not doing well in the interest of international and domestic international news. Well, I will then go straight to the comfort women issue, which is more actual. Last October, I was appointed as a member of the Independent External Committee for the Asahi Shimbun and reviewed their past comfort women coverage. This was really hard work, personally, but I will tell you about our reports. Mr. Abe and his followers had repeatedly reproached Asahi for failing to retract the wartime testimonies of Mr. Yoshida Seiji, who served as a labor official during the Asia-Pacific War. And his statement turned out to be fictitious in later years. So that's the start of the story. And against such background of how the whole incident started, it was Mr. Abe who set the agenda and caused, albeit indirectly, the Asahi management to deal with the issue. The management, as I interviewed them, was made to fear that unless it reviewed its past reports on the comfort women issue, it would not be able to live up to their reputation as a quality paper. So this feature, all these pages, by the Asahi on August 5th and 6th, was in fact planned not as a part of journalism, but as a part of a, quote, crisis management on the part of the board member of Asahi. And it turned out to be a remarkable success on the side of Mr. Abe and a dreadful mistake on the side of Asahi, which maybe you all know. When Asahi retracted the article that contained quotes by Yoshida Seiji, its rival, Yomiuri, aggressively campaigned against the paper and claimed its correctness by contrasting its own with those of Asahi. The truth was, however, that Yomiuri also covered Yoshida, and it didn't retract its own articles. And Yomiuri has been the most reluctant paper to report on the comfort women issue throughout these years. But not only Yomiuri, but also the liberal left-leaning Mainichi followed this move and attacked Asahi in order to gain back its lost circulation, as well as its influence on society as a purveyor of the zeitgeist of the nation. The whole affair was a battle over hegemony among Japanese national media. And the easiest and simplest way to take hegemony in the current popular sentiment is to be in line with mainstream views. And I measured the amount of the articles in each paper. And since 2009, the conservative Sankei has caught up with the liberal Asahi in terms of the number of articles on comfort women published. So we see a clear trend from this table that Asahi reporters have been discouraged to write about the comfort women issue since 1990. So at first, during the 90s, they are encouraged, and they thought that it should be covered as a national news. But lately, they've been quite hesitant to pick up these issues. And I was also asked by the Asahi management to review the formation of the international public opinion regarding comfort women issue as well. And I examined almost 600 articles of the coverage of comfort women in France, Germany, UK, and US. And this is a chart of fluctuations of the amount. Interestingly, the number of articles in these investigated regions fluctuated in a similar way, and it was quite remarkable to see how influential Mr. Abe has been on this issue recently. My quantitative analysis shows clearly that he has been the main agenda setter in recent discussions on comfort women. The volume increased both during the periods of the first and second Abe administration. And these are the names of politicians and other figures that were frequently quoted in comfort women coverage. So the top is Abe Shinzo, 96, and next comes Hashimoto Toru, and then comes Murayama and so on. Interestingly, Momii of NHK is also on the list too. And who was mentioned? And Abe was the most mentioned politician or most mentioned person throughout. So my conclusion to this report was that it was neither Yoshida Seiji or Asahi who discredited Japan in the eyes of the world, but it was Mr. Abe and his colleagues and his followers who contributed to spreading the negative image of Japan. His visit to Yasukuni Shrine, together with a move to review Japan's war apology, Kono Danwa, was nothing but was seen as an offensive and reckless provocation from the perspective of countries that suffered most under Japanese imperialism. But this, at the same time, suggests that Mr. Abe is the key for resolving this entangled relationship with neighboring countries. If he makes strenuous efforts to find an alternative path, perhaps in conjunction with his initiative to make a society with shining women, as well as the 70th anniversary year since the end of the World War II, it would make an extraordinary positive impact on international public opinion. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This was quite interesting. I may, it's not the job of the moderator, but I may add something, a few sentences. This is true. I can confirm for the German-speaking countries and press that the reports about the comfort woman topic had a deep increase, and it was mainly, yes, skeptical about the attitude of the Japanese government. So in this way, it's true that the qualitative part might have the opposite effects as the government might have planned. This is just a personal remark, but I confirm what Professor Hayashi said. So there might be many, many questions. I would like, because this is a topic which is quite hotly discussed, to really keep on questions and not to give statements. This sometimes happens. So if you raise your hands, ask a question, and please don't give any counter statements or statements for support. So who has a question? Fujita-san.
Thank you, Professor Hayashi. I'm with the Kokumin Shimbun, founded by the Soho Tokutomi. So I have a totally different view from you. I'd like a question about the term Daito Senso, the Greater East Asiatic War, or Great East Asian War. That name is the official name of the war Japan fought from 1941 till 45. But the name was banned to be used in the media by the occupation army. And so, including Sankei, I talked to Sankei, but they said, no, we can't use that name. We have to say Pacific War, because of various reasons. The Sankei raised various reasons not to use the term Daito Senso. What's your opinion about this?
You want a question?
Yes, I mean, my opinion about calling Pacific War, naming Pacific War as Pacific War.
Greater East Asiatic War official name cannot be used in the media. Sankei, Asahi, Yomiuri, Mainichi. They don't use the term Daito Senso. We do.
Yeah. Well, I am not here to historian, and I want to know why you have this. You use this term instead of using Pacific War, and then I can perhaps discuss with you some of the views you have. But just saying that whether this term is official or not, and who set this term official, it's really hard to say at this conference. It's beyond my scope.
So, another question? So, Bridget.
Richard Lloyd Parry of The Times. I wonder if you could comment or talk more generally about the international impact that the Japanese media has, because one of the two things have always struck me about the Japanese media, and these are personal impressions not based on any kind of data. One is that the Japanese media is incredibly well resourced, far more than any other national media I'm aware of. Whenever there is a big story, the Japanese TV stations send helicopters into the sky. Any news story is inundated with large numbers of reporters. Japanese newspapers in their foreign bureaus have multiple correspondents, despite having space for foreign news, which isn't any greater than the space, for example, in my paper. We have far fewer individuals and financial resources. So that's one thing. They're really well-resourced and extremely well-staffed. But the second thing is that in international terms, and my experience here goes back nearly 20 years, the Japanese media internationally rarely makes much of an impact. And as I say, I don't have data, so I'm slightly wondering whether I'm missing something. But from time to time, stories in British or American or French or German newspapers from other places in the world will become international news. The British newspaper, The Guardian's story about the National Security Agency leaks and so on is one example. But I rarely see stories originated in the Japanese media that have the same kind of impact. So I wonder, first of all, whether I'm right about the huge resources they enjoy, and secondly, whether there is a mismatch between this large number of resources and a lack of global punch, as it were. Sorry, that's a long question.
So I can only give you my impression. Japanese media, well, I also said that Japanese media is for Japanese national community, and it's organized that way that they try to satisfy information needs for the Japanese people, and it's also done solely in the Japanese language. So the information flow from Japan to overseas, you have to have some translation first, and then it's not only the matter of language, they have also a different assumption of what's important, what news values are. So here you have this space of different news values from news values outside. Take, for example, about this French terrorism and all these things. You have different emphasis. So by the time Japanese media influence overseas, then there's a big time lag. So I don't think resources that they invest that matters much on impacts of overseas. So it's solely on the domestic market. I can't really answer your question more, but it's totally domestic oriented. And that is also something that cause also the time lag of shifting from newspaper to the internet too. They are well protected. Yeah.
So I will ask the next question. And you talked about the agenda setting of the Abe administration. And you mentioned all these points from Abenomics, women that shine, which you like, and collective self-defense and other things. Is there any difference between the internet and the printed and the conventional old media, if we want to call them like this? So my personal impression was that the critic voices mostly are on the internet, the young people, whilst the traditional, or is it different that the internet, I know that some conservative and right-wingers are active there as well. Where is the opposition in Japanese media? It's not all the same and doing what the agenda-setting government wants them to do.
It depends on how you define the opposition. So if you...
Critical questions about whether
government?
it will work. Whether it will work. You can talk about women that shine, and you can look at reality and say maybe it's a bit different. Where's this gap?
Well, if you see Japanese newspapers, you also see critical comments, and they also do some control functions about the government. If you really read them, but where do you? Yes, and in the internet you have also oppositions, but you have different kinds of opinions, more extreme in the internet, whereas in the conventional media they, so to say, control the the horizon or width of discourse that is allowed, I think. So, and it's traditionally, so to say, set that everybody knows where they can go, how far they can go. So to say, the self-restriction, self-control, but it's not a censorship, and they try to manage how far they can go. So, and in the case of comfort women, I think the boundary of how far they can go to talk about comfort women issue were different from the boundaries that we see now. So that's why these discrepancies about how you talk about comfort women issues in the 90s and at the moment are so different, and that's why we had this Asahi scandal, and in the conventional media.
Thank you. Is this on? Richard Dyke. I'm actually from the Asia Center at Harvard, not part of the working press. But 2 weeks ago, we had interviews of people who were applying for a graduate program at Harvard. And among the applicants were 4 journalists from the Asahi. Actually, on the interviewing panel, there was also a senior person from Asahi. There were also people who applied from Nikkei and from Sankei and so forth. I took it upon myself to ask each of the Asahi journalists what they thought about what you're calling the scandal. Each of them said they were embarrassed. They said in their individual bureaus, they would have study sessions. They felt that their management let them down. You might not be able to answer this because you're on the independent panel, but it does seem that the morale of the journalists in Asahi is way down, and they felt that their president and the board let them down. Do you have any comments about that?
Yes, I heard the same thing, but yeah, that's Asahi's problem, yeah. Thank you for your comments.
Süddeutsche Zeitung Neidhardt. Let me play stupid. You said everybody knows how far they can go. The last time I looked, Japan didn't have censorship. And I know plenty of young journalists who have hot stories that never have been published because what you call how far they can go. So please explain the mechanism why this self-censorship in this country works so well.
Well, I wouldn't say everybody. Of course, there are other exceptions and courageous journalists here in Japan. I would say that each company has this internal training system. There are no, so to say, outside journalism training program in Japan across the board. If you are a college student and you want to be a journalist, you have to go to either Asahi or NHK, each company, and get the entrance examination, and there you will get trained as a journalist. And if you go, you're sent to a local small bureau, and were taught how you cover police stories, or how you behave yourselves as a journalist, and all these things. So this mechanism of in-house training plays quite a big role, how you perceive the world as a Japanese journalist. And this stipulates how Japanese journalism works so far. And there are some initiatives to try to change this from the side of the college professors and also from other journalist initiatives, but it's quite slow. So I think the training mechanism is quite different from other European or United States, American system, and that counts a lot. That's one explanation. I don't know whether you're satisfied with this. No?
So in what way different?
So if you are trained as a journalist in Japan, you are trained in-house, and you see how you are taught from the senior journalists how you see the world in-house as Asahi way or as a Yomiuri way. But if you're a journalist, for example, in the United States, if you become a journalist, then you work for one company and then you jump to the other, and you are, so to say, exposed to other competitive mechanisms. But in Japan, you are also promoted inside the company, and there you have tacit rules of how you can get stories and how your articles get published. And that's a big control mechanism of how Japanese journalism works. Of course, there are other different mechanisms of social control that maybe is a more cultural thing. But I can't really explain that in a detailed way. This is a really cultural thing, and Japanese want to be conform to the groups they belong to and so on. But if you focus on the journalism system, then this sort of cultural system is crystallized in the in-house training, that you have to be considerate to the senior journalists. You have your peers, and you get promoted in-house, and you learn rules that are not written anywhere, but you are Asahi journalist, or you are Yomiuri journalist, or you are NHK journalist. And it can be really explained how this what these are in words.
Any questions? Otherwise, first there, then you.
Siegfried Knittel, freelancer journalist from Germany. Is there no understanding in the newspapers that this kind of journalism isolates Japan? Is there no understanding how the different role of the Japanese media? do journalists or the editors, they don't understand how different they are from the other newspapers.
Well, yeah, yes. I would say maybe yes, that's because of the globalization, and if you say that Asahi journalists applied to Harvard program and they experienced American journalism, they realized that something is different in the United States than what is happening in Japan. So some of them know that it's different. I would say that I criticize Japanese journalism too, but on the other hand, Japanese journalism as a community journalism, they are sometimes observant to, they are considerate to people. I mean, I'm also in the regulatory board for the TV programs, and some of the really radical scandals that we see in the West are not existent in Japan in a way. Yeah, so I don't idealize both sides, but I would say that Japanese media, even newspapers with millions of copies, they are there for Japanese they have been there for Japanese national community. And they, of course, some people realize that it's quite different from media overseas. But some say that it's not good. But others maybe say that, well, we're different, and what's wrong with it? So that's the attitude I sometimes experience. So what's wrong with it? Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean. The interpretation of globalization, for example, has a good side and bad side. So it's a matter of judgment, and yeah, it's up to your judgment how you interpret it for the Japanese society. But at the time of globalization, I'm sure it's not a sustainable attitude in reality. That's for sure. So something should be changed too.
Sorry, the next one.
I very much disagree with you, but I don't want to discuss. I have another question. South Korea, in many ways, is a similar society to Japan, and the big South Korean newspapers are as similar to each other as the big newspapers here. So you have similar problems. But in South Korea, you have Oh My News, which started in 2001 and was even able to help a liberal opposition figure to become president. Oh My News tried to do the same thing in Japan. It totally failed because there was no interest. There were no so-called citizen journalists who wanted to write for Oh My News. So there is not only a lack of independent coverage, independent reporting, there's obviously also a lack for there are no independent readers. Nobody asks for non-official news. Nobody wants to hear what's really going on in Fukushima or things like that.
Well, yeah, of course, if you compare with Korea, then, I mean, journalism is not something that you have there as without context. And Korea experienced the democratization in the late 80s, whereas Japan experienced it quite a long time ago, maybe also not from by themselves. So, yeah, that's another explanation. I don't say that. I don't see that that contradicts my comments before that Japan. I couldn't really understand that. I agree with you. Yeah.
Why is there no demand for freedom of the press in this country?
No demand? I don't think there are. I think there are demands for free press in a way, but maybe not strong. It's a matter of the degree and what the topics are, and of course these debates about revolving around nuclear energy or comfort women, this has to do with nationalism. And there they stopped arguing. So if things are different, I don't know, I can't think of a good example, but there are motives that they need more information, and they are proud of having free society in parts of society, in parts of Japanese society. But nationalism is always a break for this motivation, and issue comfort women, and I say also the nuclear issue, and what other things. These themes are crystallization of Japanese nationalism in the recent understanding. So they stop talking freely, I think, because that has to do with the Japanese pride of technology or women, war, and so on. I don't know, I can persuade you. But it's so hard to generalize this. And also not, I don't think I believe in generalizing these issues, that Japanese don't like free press or so on. It's also a sweeping statement, too much for me. I can't say that.
So let's have a Japanese question first, and then Richard, and then we go on.
Sorry.
Oh.
My name is Jong-Hwan Kim. I'm a publisher of Sesame Tube, YouTube-based internet broadcasting, with a background of Washington correspondent for the Busan Daily for 6 years. My question is, during the last year, especially, public outburst of anxiety about the North Korean infiltration underground tunnels in Korea, and the public response was just a denial. But we appealed for foreign media also to cover more elaborately on the problem. But so far, most of the sole correspondent from Japanese media almost neglected that issue. So do you have any idea for us to make it known to Japanese public? Because Korean Peninsula issue, especially the national security, is very important to Japanese people also.
Well, I have no idea how you can influence Japanese journalists to pick up these issues. You have more, you go drinking with them. Yes, or influence government more and not journalists, because that's maybe a shortcut to make them pick up these issues.
Okay, Richard first.
As I understood it, one of your graphs seemed to show quite clearly that among younger people, 40 and under, the internet is taking over from newspapers. But then the earlier graph about print circulation showed an extremely small-looking dip in print sales. Now, I wonder how you reconcile the two. Does this mean that younger people are buying newspapers and just not opening them, not reading them? How has print circulation remained so stubbornly high compared to almost every other market in the world?
Well, it's sagging 10%, and a survey also shows that more and more one-person household do not subscribe newspapers. So the trend is there. But as I said, many, and also Japanese younger people who live with parents, they read, whether they read or not, they subscribe newspapers for the household. So the newspaper numbers, circulation numbers, still remain steady now. But in 20 years, it will change, I think, and that's the fear of the management. So I can't really say that, and I don't think that young people don't really subscribe newspapers at all, and they don't read newspapers. My students, for example, they just check their news on the mobile phone and not from papers. I've never seen my students reading papers. So, but it's steady because of the, as I said, of the delivery stations that they automatically bring newspapers home in the morning, and this still sustains the market. But it's a reminiscence of the past 50 years or so.
But they must be getting some new readers among the young to replace the elderly who are dying out. I mean, in the UK, newspapers are going down 10% a year or more. Not over the period you were speaking.
Well, but lifestyle but I think new subscriptions are doing very bad, and I have to see the figures how different young people behave, how different the younger people behave between the UK and Japan, but the tendency is the same.
So, gentlemen, there.
Thank you. My name is Errol Ahmed. I have a small research outlet. Can I have two questions? Okay. The second one first, because it sort of relates to the subscription issue. We just were offered on Friday approximately, allegedly 40,000 yen worth of merchandise to subscribe for 3 months to a national newspaper. We rejected that. It's not something that happened last Friday. It's been going on for like 10 years. So first, I want to know if this is legal. And if it has got any impact on stubborn subscription numbers. The second question is on the censorship issue. On the day of the March 11 earthquake, all the TV channels were making these experts, they were airing them to get their opinion. And I had the opportunity to have a very frank chat with one of them approximately 2 months later in May 2011. At that chat, he said that he was a very famous professor, by the way. He said he was the first one to point out the Fukushima issue, and when he was talking in one of the major channels at the headquarters, there was a phone call from Mr. Prime Minister, not himself, but his aide, I guess, and a piece of paper was circulated. It says, Fukushima no koto furuna, so don't talk about Fukushima. And he said he was very upset because the anchor person actually passed the paper without making any comment. And he said, I will never talk to the TV stations anymore because they have no sort of ethical barrier. They just let me to see that paper. So that's, he thought as a major censorship issue. Whether you have any opinion on the general, I had just one anecdote like that. These are the two things. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of subscription, I think in conjunction with the question, former question, your question, the numbers or nominal number of circulations are quite different from the actual numbers. I have to add. They also give us there are statistics, ABC statistics that they give the circulation numbers. And that was based upon that circulation numbers, the price of advertisement is calculated. So they give some numbers, but in reality, it's rumored or said that the number of the circulation has been sagging more radically.
Are they manipulating the numbers?
Yes. That's the rumor, or that's what's been discussed and said. So the reality, how the circulation numbers are, is quite different from how the statistics shows. So and it's called oshigami, pushing papers, that they push these papers to the small delivery stations, and they don't know what to do, so they, so to say, secretly ban these papers to somewhere else and so on. So there are rumors, and if you see the internet sites, you see these, so to say, news of about this black market of the newspaper, black markets. I haven't confirmed this yet, but it's quite, it's talked quite openly in the market. So the second question, so that's what that also answers your question that in UK and they are dropping the drops are quite more enormously, and maybe in Japan it's not like this, a little bit more than what we see in the statistics. And secondly, the censorship. Well, so I couldn't understand your question to me, that how I feel the government censorship, or how.
I mean, is there a policy or written or unwritten? Of course, it's not written.
No policy. I hope.
You're an academic who is an expert on journalism in Japan.
Yeah.
I understand. Do you have any views on that? Have you ever researched that? Mine is just an anecdotal thing, but it was a primary source, so it's not a rumor.
Censorship.
Maybe let's say like this. How far do you think is the influence? You said it's agenda setting. Agenda setting is just by content. They try and the media follow. This is a different story. This is a direct influence. And how far do you think the Kante or other ministries might influence directly into the, let's say, headquarters of media?
I mean, the word censorship is a very strong word. So, and I think you wouldn't say that as a manager of the Asahi or Yomiuri that we got censored today or something like that. So, and even if I interview them, so I mean, you know more about this than I do. First, how these kind of things happen. Whether you get called from foreign ministry or Kante or somewhere, and whether you call this censorship or not, I don't know. And the second thing, maybe I can imagine, this is my imagination, that understanding of democracy and how you cope with information and what the relationship between government and media, the normative image of how government should stand towards media is a bit different from what you would imagine as a Western journalist. So if you work here as a foreign correspondent in Japan, and you say, oh, that's not censorship, here it is, you see Japanese journalists that got censored, but from the Japanese point of view, maybe they would say they have just a good relationship, yeah? So it's a matter of how you define censorship. And democracy is a free press, free flow of information, as you questioned quite much about that. Japanese people don't want to have free press. Maybe this kind of sentiment has something to do with it, that you have different position of how you see the censorship. But I can't really say that I have never conducted any interviews, and even if I would conduct interview, they would never say that we got censorship yesterday, in a way. But on the other hand, in terms of, for example, pornography or other things, there are many other research how they got censored, in a way, in the name of indecency. And that's another debate. But political censorship is very difficult. It's very tacit.
So we are coming to an end, so I would like you to keep the questions short. The gentleman over there, Siegfried, and then it's over. Yeah, you. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Makino, a lawyer. So I'm usually裁判. So I'm a little knowledge. So I ask you a fundamental question. You are a member of Commonwealth Women's Panel member. So you feel some pressure or influence you feel, or as a member, you freely make an opinion and discussion, or some limitation you feel, or what is the best way to make a research system about this problem? For example, Abe make an independent research system or something. You said this paper on this paper, New York Post or something.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a very good question, I think. Yes, I had difficulties conducting research on as a member of the third external panel of the Asahi Shimbun, because firstly, Asahi apologized first and then gave us this task. So if they have apologized first, and we can't really say, okay, but you didn't do anything wrong with it. They said that they admitted that they did something wrong. So we had to start from that premises. That is also one restriction. I don't say the restriction, but that's the condition that we had to work. And I was, honestly speaking, I wasn't really sure how we could judge things that was reported back in the 90s to judge whether it was appropriate or not at this time of in 2014. So it was quite difficult. And secondly, the premise we worked on is that we were appointed by the Asahi. So the members there were people that Asahi appointed. So we had to work together harmoniously. So, and we have to conclude, or we have to write a report. That's quite difficult, actually, because comfort women is much debated, and views towards this is quite different from position to position. And I was the only woman in the panel, which makes difference, in my view. So, so there are many restrictions, and I don't know whether this is the best way to review scandals like this that happen to journalism organization. So I think it's the report we wrote. I think it was quite a good report, and I believe in it. But on the other hand, we also, looking back, what was the best way to solve these problems this kind of scandal in journalism? And I also looked up other examples, like in New York Times and Washington Post, and they have their own ways to cope with it, and each has its advantages and disadvantages. So, yeah.
So Siegfried with the last question.
Back to the problem of the censorship. I think, is it perhaps in Japan, in the media, more the case that journalists think they want to be close to the government, and in Western media they think we have to fight against the government? Is this not a main difference between the media here and the media in foreign countries? And this brings me back to the other point. You say Mr. Abe sets the trends, but I think how can a prime minister set a trend? I think the society society has. Why does it? Is there no resistance from society against a prime minister setting the trends?
The first point that the relationship between government and journalists, that many Japanese journalists want to be close to the government. This is, I think, true, and especially as you're all aware of it, the Kisha Club system has contributed this type of relationship between journalists and government. And this system still exists and endorse this kind of attitudes too. So, and how can you can governments set agenda? Well, Abe has been doing quite well, so, and he uses everything. He also showed up in the variety, Tamori no nandake, Waratti Itomo, you know. He was there for, I think, more than half an hour or something, or maybe quite long, and had an interview with this variety talk show master. Or he also comes up with Momokuro idols, and he also uses his Facebook and so on, and he's successful with the agenda, and you can also ask Japanese public whether it is a good thing or not, and many people say, okay, well, we have this agenda and we cope with it, and they think that it's a good thing, or not good thing, but that's the way it is here in this country. I don't say that this is a good thing or a bad thing. I say this is how it is, what is happening. And I would then go back to the Japanese journalists, how they think about it and what their roles are. That's my work, but that's how they do it is it's in the hands of the journalists and not mine.
It was a wonderful sentence to finish for today. So thank you very much for coming and for answering all this.
Well, thank you very much.
Quite difficult questions.
Tough questions.
Yes, sometimes tough questions.
Tough questions, yes, but thank you very much.
If you want to go on with tough questions, you should simply come to our bar sometimes. As a speaker, you get the 1 year honorary membership.
Thank you very much.
So you're always welcome for coffee, beer, or whatever you like.
Then I will bring my students.
And
Thank you very much.
Yes, you could bring your students,
Yes.
and there will be some people there, and could be some interesting debate about media and whatever.
And one thing, if you have more data about viewership or other comfort women issues and so on, I have all these data, so please feel free to come to me, and I give you the source and the links too.
Let me ask you one short question at the end. You showed these impressive figures about quoting Mr. Abe, Mr. Hashimoto, whoever.
Yeah.
This was just the numbers. You read all these articles. What was your impression about the content? So if you read American, British, German, or whatever media, did they criticize Asahi, or did they criticize the Abe administration to set an agenda to change the view on history?
They are very critical about Japan and Abe administration, most of them. I didn't see any of the articles that were friendly to Japanese attitude about comfort women. None.
Okay. Thank you very much.
That was very clear, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's it for today.
Thank you very much.
Time.
Thank you.